This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 412, entitled Masculist Disciplining of Women. Description. This flyer shows how masculisted men can discipline/punish women who oppress them, lashing out particularly at fluffies, at fluffy feminists, at monoconscious feminazi bigots, that's MFBs, and against young feminist princess arrogance. The flyer itself. Masculist Disciplining of Women by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer explains how men who are intellectually armed with masculist ideas are in a position to discipline women so that women can no longer nag men, control men, be monoconscious feminazi bitchy to men, destroy divorcing fathers' lives in the divorce courts, be feminist princess arrogant towards men, etc. It lists ways that masculisted men now have the ideological power to crush women who ruin men's lives. It begins with a list of such ways, followed by a more detailed discussion of each point in the list. Here is the list. Bullet. Masculist annihilation of fluffies. Bullet. Masculist annihilation of fluffy feminists. Bullet. Making women bi-conscious. Bullet. Pricking feminist princess arrogance. Now for the elaborations. Bullet. Masculist annihilation of fluffies. The core idea of the masculist is that masculism is essentially a rebellion by men against being man-slaves to women, against working for women for decades. Masculists argue that it was men who liberated women by giving them the pill, household gadgets, science-based medicine, higher education, a life expectancy well into the 80s, etc. So that even those women who stay at home for 6 years raising their 2 kids still have a career window of half a century, so have a powerful moral duty to become FIPS, that's financially independent person, by bothering to get a career competent education at high school and college, so that they do not expect to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. To have one's masculinist consciousness raised means to see fluffydom, a fluffie, this in brackets, a fluffie, based on the word fluff, is a masculinist label for a traditional woman who does not bother to fip up, so expects to be able to manslay some gullible man fool who has not yet bothered to raise his masculinist consciousness by not having bothered to study masculinist ideas, so is then manipulated by fluffies, and if he becomes a married father, he will face a 1 in 4 chance of being financially massacred in the hated fluffy feminist controlled divorce court system. More on this in the next section. A man who has had his masculinist consciousness raised sees fluffydom as manslavery, and manslavery as slavery, which is to be hated. So masculists have a hatred of fluffies and fluffy feminists and aim to wipe them out. We do this by punishing them severely, by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, seen as immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin to be wiped out. Masculists aim to put a masculist group in every high school, every campus, so that male classmates can put enormous moral pressure on their female classmates, so that those fluffy students feel rejected and spat at for choosing to be fluffy crappers, that is, choosing to study fluffy crap majors the soft option, that is, memory-based majors that don't require analytic thought like math and the sciences at high school, for example, English literature, history, languages, etc., which will preclude them from studying STEM, that's science, tech, engineering, math, and the professions at university. With their fluffy crap diploma at college, they will then be too poor on the whole to be able to afford to buy their own middle-class house. So in their 30s, with their biological clocks ticking hard, they will look around for some gullible, manslavable, unmasculisted man to sexploit, living off his money and labour, so that she can raise her kids in a middle-class house that he pays for. The average feministed woman with the pill will have had some 40 different penises in her by the time she is 30. 10 years after her marriage, her 2 kids and his house, she will be bored with her 41st penis husband, so takes him to the hated fluffy feminist dominated divorce court system, where she will get sole custody of her kids with a 90% probability. She will get his house to raise her kids in, child payments to kids he will barely see, lose half his stuff and wealth to her, and if she is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for life, so that she remains a parasite of him after the divorce the way she was before the divorce. This is such a massive injustice against men that I hear informally at national divorce lawyer conferences in the US that the top topic of conversation amongst these fluffy feminist divorce lawyers and judges is how many of their colleagues were murdered by divorcing fathers over the past year. This topic is kept out of the news since these fluffy feminist lawyers and judges do not want to inspire other divorcing fathers to pick up a weapon and go on a masculist war against the hated fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges. To masculists, what is happening in the divorce courts to men is an obvious war issue. No culture that financially crucifies a quarter of its fathers can remain intact. There will be an explosion. Men will snap, pick up arms and go on a sex war, assassinating the gender politicians who created these deeply misandrous gender laws in the first place, murder thousands of fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges, and even go out into the streets and shoot millions of fluffy feminists, since responsible males, masculist soldiers, will not tolerate that these short-sighted monoconscious feminazis indirectly wipe out whole populations, which is what they are currently doing, since they have made divorce so toxic for men that they have made marriage and paternity such a shitty deal for men that in many countries now 2/3 of young men refuse to marry and reject paternity, thus wiping out whole populations in a mere few generations. Masculists see fluffies and fluffy feminists as indirect genociders who have to be stopped, with bullets if necessary. Fortunately, there are more benign methods to mend-fair the gender laws, and that is the masculist tactic to wipe out, that is, exterminate, in brackets, slowly, fluffies and fluffy feminists. The masculists need to preach their message to the general public, especially to the journalists, who can then spread the masculist message to the masses, the millions, and in time, the billions, telling young women that they have to fip up or risk being labelled with the dreaded F branded onto their foreheads, standing for fluffy, which will mean for them the kiss of death in terms of ever getting a man, since in the coming years young men will avoid such fluffy parasites like the plague, treating them as immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin, and will severely punish them by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them. Such fluffies will rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at as fluffy vermin. We men have the financial power to do this to women, to fluffies, since nearly all men are fips. We are socialised to be fips. We even evolved to be fips. So we don't need the money of a woman to survive financially. We are capable of making our own money. So we are in a position to force women to fip up, since a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible manslave, But unfortunately for fluffies, the supply of such gullible, masculistically ignorant, manslavable men is drying up as the Masculist and MGTOW, that's men going their own way, movements get their message out via the internet. This Masculist and MGTOW message is getting out there. I read that in the UK now, young men care more about the level of fitness of a potential girlfriend than they do about her looks. They ask themselves with a very cold eye if the potential girlfriend is sufficiently fit. They ask themselves, quote, "Is this woman expecting to parasite off my money and labour if we marry and have kids? If so, then fuck her, or rather someone else can fuck her, or better still, no one fucks her, the vile, manslaving parasite." This is the end of part 1.